My name is Andrew McCullough. It's great to be able to join all of you today as we move through this youth advocacy guide to create conditions of empowerment for young people to get involved in advocacy and the trauma-informed movement as much as possible. Young people have valuable and unique lived experiences that can play an important role in shaping this work moving forward. I work with the Campaign for Trauma-Informed Policy and Practice, which you will hear me refer to as CTIP from this point forward. The objective of this youth advocacy series was to create a space for youth to have a voice to advocate for themselves and others when facing challenges that can lead to trauma. So a question that you might have: why did I get into advocacy, and why am I so passionate about this subject? Well, imagine working in a community or organization focused on child welfare, where you identify systemic challenges hindering effective support for at-risk family and youth not having a voice on their own cases. One of the things I focused on was improving outcomes in a system with significant disparities. This became my initial steps towards advocacy. The creation involved collaboration with youth in the system, young adults, caregivers, local court administrators, social workers, and Congress. I saw an opportunity to improve my work in trauma-informed spaces by leveraging collaboration and cross-sector partnerships to streamline services and improve outcomes. The existing ways of having inclusion were outdated, with siloed departments and processes that hindered effective voices in the decision-making. Work that I have done in the past has led to policy change around advocacy in my state here in Florida. Both state and local leaders expressed strong support that align with broader initiatives and committing resources to facilitate implementation. This experience highlighted the importance of youth voice in driving change and fostering collaboration across diverse stakeholders. The cross-functional initiative resulted in transformative changes by 1, improving youth and caregiver satisfaction; 2, it gave youth a voice; and 3, it increased a more inclusive and supportive work partnership between youth and administrators. My philosophy for centering youth voice and lived experiences by taking a proactive approach to systems change on different topics such as trauma, and we can yield positive outcomes through collaboration, innovation, and a focus on holistic solutions. Each real-world situation creates unique challenges and opportunities, but the principles of cross-sector partnership and creative problem-solving can be adapted to drive impactful change. Today, we will begin the first of 8 sessions in this series and begin by discussing why advocacy is important for trauma-informed movements as we work to create conditions of safety and empowerment for youth, teens, and young adults to get involved. Trauma-informed approaches to advocacy are essential for everyone, especially when engaging with young people, because it is critical to recognize, respond to, and support individuals who have experienced adversity, while we must also work to hear from people who have been impacted by systems to help us improve those systems through policy change, education campaigns, and more. This is why we say that democracy is an antidote to trauma. Trauma-informed approaches are about a paradigm shift, changing the question we ask ourselves from "what's wrong with you?" to "what happened to you?" Creating a safe and empowering space for that healing and for that growth. So why trauma-informed advocacy, and why is that important? Well, first we have to understand the impact of trauma. Trauma is common. Most individuals experience at least one traumatic event in their lives, and the majority of those who experience trauma have more than one traumatic event. Trauma can change the way our brains develop, impacting our emotional regulation and decision-making, which can lead to challenges in schools, relationships, and within our mental health. Without the proper support, trauma can contribute to a long term of mental health struggles such as anxiety and depression. Trauma can also contribute to physical health struggles like headaches and stomach aches. And over the long term, without proper support, trauma can lead to issues like social isolation, substance use, violent behaviors, and/or involvement in the justice system. So what do we have to do? 2, create safe and supportive environments. Trauma-informed environments prioritize emotional and physical safety, ensuring people feel heard, valued, and respected. Creating universal conditions like these reduces re-traumatization by using approaches that promote healing rather than punishment or blame. Safe spaces help us humans build trust relationships, which are crucial for healing and personal growth. but we also have to empower you to heal and to thrive. Trauma-informed advocacy focuses on the strengths rather than the deficits, helping youth recognize their resilience and potential. It encourages that self-advocacy, giving young people the tools to express their needs and make informed decisions. It integrates positive childhood experiences, such as mentorship, stable relationships, and community support to counterbalance the past, the present, and future trauma. Fourth thing we have to do is promote equity and systemic change. Many individuals who experience trauma also face systemic barriers, such as poverty, discrimination, lack of access to mental health care. Trauma-informed advocacy works to change policies and practices in schools, healthcare, the criminal or legal system, and other systems to ensure everybody has access to compassionate, effective support so that they can thrive. It encourages cultural humility, recognizing that we all see the world through different lenses based on our diverse experiences and tailoring support to individual needs. And finally, we have to prevent future trauma and break those cycles. Creating trauma-informed environments helps break intergenerational cycles of trauma and adversity by creating healthier conditions for individuals, families, and communities, teaching healthy coping skills to help build resilience so we can thrive. Early intervention reduces the long-term impact of trauma, improving life outcomes in education, employment, and individuals' overall well-being. Young people who receive trauma-informed support are more likely to become resilient leaders and advocates, creating a ripple effect in their communities into the future. Trauma-informed advocacy is not just about addressing past harm. It's about building a foundation for healing, empowerment, and success. By supporting, listening, and advocating for youth, we help them turn adversity into strength and create a future where they can thrive, not just survive. Before we dive into more content, we want to go over some predictions, acknowledgments, and disclaimers about the content that will be in this series. We call these paths, as they can help us anticipate content that will be discussed, which helps create conditions of safety. We have two primary goals working with you as we go through this series. First, we want to support your group in building a trauma-informed coalition that advances a particular issue or issues that the group decides is important. You are important agents of change, and we are developing this series to support groups like you to take that coordinated action. And then second, this is the first time we are delivering this series, which we look forward to scaling after we get your feedback about what works and what doesn't work. There will be opportunities to share what resonated most and what still needs improvement after each session in the series as a whole, and we value your input and feedback as we move through this together. You are playing an important role in shaping the development of this curriculum so we can help to mobilize more young people. We understand that everyone is arriving in this space from a different place, and we invite you to choose how you engage based on what feels most relevant, useful, and meaningful to you. Everyone has the right to participate. Everyone has the right to pass. We understand that there are different perspectives and opinions, so we want to make sure we value what others say and show them courtesy and respect. We also want to have an open space for all individuals to have a chance to express their feelings and share what feels important to them. We acknowledge that there is no one-size-fits-all way to approach trauma and advocacy, and we invite you to consider this series to be a generalized guide rather than an authoritative source. There are a lot of different ways to do things, and we will be talking about concepts based on the best evidence that we could retrieve, as well as CTIP's experience in its own journey and realizing its own advocacy goals. We will focus a lot on certain approaches, and we also hope to uplift different advocacy avenues you may find fit for you, including those that take place outside of your elected officials' offices. We want to support you based on what you need and intend this to be an ongoing process where we continually strive to strengthen the presentation of this content and also to be inclusive of other topics that you all as advocates, from the seasoned leaders to those just beginning to work, we want to make sure that you're finding all of this useful. We welcome you to reach out to us and let us know what you like about these 8 modules. And we may not be able to include everything as we go through, but we'll do our best to add as much as we can, and your feedback will help us improve these modules as we continue to develop them moving forward. We also think it's important to mention that, as you notice, various quotes interwoven throughout this series. Please know that we are not necessarily endorsing the person quoted, but instead intend to help create connections to energy around the themes of the content as we explore. Throughout this series, we will talk about trauma, trauma-informed approaches, advocacy, coalition building, and navigating to find the right approaches and discussing ways that you can get involved in the movement that you care about. It is our hope that through this series, this group will mobilize together around at least one issue that affects you all, as well as supporting individual advocacy efforts you all are interested in. As you see here on the screen, here are the 8 modules, starting off with Module 1, what is trauma? By the end of the first module, it is our best hope that you feel equipped with the knowledge and tools needed to define and describe trauma with a specific emphasis on what it means to be trauma-informed and the many ways that can look. And finally, we also want you to know upfront that throughout this series, we'll be discussing themes and content related to sensitive topics, including making comments to experiences related to trauma and adversity at the individual, family, community, institutional, and systemic levels. We acknowledge that these discussions may create feelings of discomfort for some of you, and we invite and encourage each of you to tap into your expertise of yourself, to take steps to take care of yourself in whatever way makes sense for you as we move through these modules in this series. Within the work that CTIP does, we want to make sure we are creating inclusive space for individuals with different perspectives and lived experiences, such as people from different cultures and people with learning differences. We believe that our differences are enriching. And so our goal is to make sure this guide is accessible and inclusive for everyone. And that's why your feedback as we go through this series will help ensure we live into those important values. Let's take time to get to know you better for some independent reflection. We want to do this work as a collaboration. So here are some questions we have for you before we go through the 8 sessions. We want to make sure we are being inclusive of your thoughts and feelings where we can grow. So we'll continually ask for feedback throughout the modules. But first, we want to ask a few questions on what your idea looks like around advocacy. It's important to ensure that you are prepared, aligned, and equipped with the knowledge and tools you need. These questions are meant to help guide our group discussions, clarify the goals, and build a strong foundation for effective advocacy. I will now be dropping a Google form link into the chat to give you some time to answer. We'll take about 5 to 7 minutes to let you come up with some responses. Don't worry if you don't finish this. There will be time for you to work on it before our next meeting. Our first question: what specific issues are we advocating for? Why is this issue important to us in our community? What are the root causes of this issue? And how does this connect to trauma-informed practices? 2, how do we identify stakeholders in the audience? Who's directly affected by these issues? Who are the key decision makers we need to reach, such as policymakers, school boards, or community leaders? Who are our allies and potential partners? And what challenges or opposition might we face, and how can we prepare for them? 3, personal connection and lived experience. Why does this issue matter to each of you personally? How can we share our stories in a way that is empowering and trauma-informed? And what boundaries should we set for sharing personal experiences to avoid re-traumatization? The next question is goals and impact. What specific change do we want to see happen? Is it policy change, increased funding? Maybe it's community awareness. How will we measure success, and what are short-term and long-term goals for our advocacy efforts? 5, advocacy strategies and messaging. What advocacy methods do you want to see used? Maybe it's letter writing, public speaking, social media campaigns. What key messages do we want to communicate, and how can we make sure our messaging is inclusive, respectful, and clear? How can we adapt our messages for the different audiences, such as for youth, policymakers, or even the media? 6, what are our group strengths and roles? What strengths do you bring into this advocacy effort? Are you good at writing? Maybe you're better at speaking or doing grassroots organizing. How do you want to divide responsibilities to ensure sustainable engagement? How can we support one another throughout the advocacy process? And 7, trauma-informed considerations. How can we advocate in a way that is empowering rather than re-traumatizing? What self-care strategies can we use to prevent burnout? How do we create a safe and supportive space for all group members? In this first module, we will do a lot of heavy lifting and we'll be content heavy with lots of information. These questions and our discussions were created to help build a strong trauma-informed foundation for meaningful and effective advocacy. Trauma is a term used to describe the impacts that sometimes accompany and follow very distressing events, series of events, or experiences. One event may be traumatic for some people, while others do not experience the same trauma at all. We use the 3 E's definition of trauma, which describes how trauma results from an event or series of events, the experience of how a person interprets and reacts to the event, and the effects or lasting consequences those experiences have on us. Traumatic events experienced earlier in our lives often, though not always, have greater consequences than those experienced later in our lives, as humans development happens mostly when we're young. However, it can also be challenging later in life when there are experiences that are out of one's control, such as a serious accident, being the victim of violence, living through a natural disaster or war, or sudden and unexpected loss. When thoughts and memories of the traumatic event don't go away or get worse, they may lead to post-traumatic stress disorder or other impacts, which can seriously disrupt a person's ability to regulate their emotions and maintain those needed healthy relationships. The 3 E's. We all have experienced some level of stress on a regular basis, whether at school or at home. Daily stressors such as deadlines at school, homework, competing in extracurricular activities, stuff happening at home, and juggling a balanced life are common for young people. Even positive experiences like getting selected as a team captain, earning good grades, or starting a new project can cause some level of stress. Not all stress is bad, as tolerable stress and having healthy relationships and support around us are necessary to grow. In many cases, we have the capacity to cope with a range of life experiences, expected or unexpected, mild or intense. However, when stress is unrelenting, it can become toxic and can lead to harm, which is why trauma-informed environments are so important. So what are the 3 E's? It's an event series of events or set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening, and that has lasting adverse effects. So the first E, event. What happened? A traumatic event can be something scary, dangerous, or really upsetting that happens to a person. What makes an event traumatic is not the event itself, as we experience a lot of scary and upsetting things that do not impact us as deeply. But there are events that shake us to our core, the effects from which stay with us for long periods of time after the event occurs. This could be anything, as it is each individual's interpretation of the event that impacts this. But we see this a lot with things like being in an accident, losing someone important to us, or experiencing violence. Even if it happens to someone else, just seeing or hearing about it can impact us deeply, which we call secondary or vicarious trauma. An example of this is, imagine if you saw a big storm destroy your house. That would be a really scary event. If it happened at night and you were woken up to get to safety, you may have trouble sleeping even after extreme weather has passed. The second E, experience. How does it feel? Not everyone reacts the same way to an event. Two people can go through the same thing, but one might feel okay after a while, and the other might feel really scared, sad, or even unsafe for a long time. That's because trauma is how someone experienced an event, not just what happened. An example of this is If two kids fall off their bikes, one might get up and laugh, but the other might be too scared to ride it again. How we feel about something can be different for each person. Perhaps if two people go through a breakup, one might move on quickly, while the other might feel really hurt and have trouble trusting others again. This brings us to the third E, effect. How does it change someone? Trauma can change the way people feel, think, and act. It might make them feel anxious, have trouble sleeping, or get angry easily. It can also affect schools, friendships, and health. But with support and care, we know that people can heal, and concepts of post-traumatic growth and post-traumatic wisdom bring tremendous hope to this topic, as we know we can grow through the adversity and stress that we face. An example of this is if you touch a hot stove, your hand might hurt for a while, where trauma can leave a hurt inside us. But just like your hand can heal, so can your feelings with help. Some effects of trauma include trouble concentrating in school, feeling jumpy or avoiding individuals. But just like physical wounds heal, emotional wounds can heal too, with time and support. Understanding the three E's helps us better understand trauma and its impacts. This brings us to traumagenic forces. Traumatic experiences come in many forms, ranging from one-time events to experiences that are chronic or even generational. Potentially traumatic experiences may include natural disasters, such as hurricanes, fires, floods, human-caused disasters, accidents, wars, environmental disasters, community violence, such as robberies, assault, gang-related violence, hate crimes, or group trauma affecting a particular community, as well as school violence, where you have threats, fights, the loss of a student or a staff member, or even bullying. There's also family trauma, abuse, neglect, experience or witnessing domestic violence, incarceration of family members, family substance abuse, or sudden or unexpected loss of a loved one. And then there's medical trauma, where there's pain, injury, and serious illness. And then poverty, where there's a lack of resources, a lack of support networks or mobility, financial stressors, and sometimes even homelessness. This is why neuroscience is important. The importance of trauma and trauma-informed care are supported by various forms of science that can help us to contextualize trauma's impact across different areas. More specifically, the term neuroscience has been developed to explain the various impacts of trauma, as well as the hopeful side of how we can grow from and withstand challenges we face in life. In addition, it helps individuals connect with concepts to draw parallels to their lives and their experiences. It also helps shape our understanding of how the individual, family, community, system, and policies are interconnected and impacted by trauma. And it can be a tool for self-understanding and compassion. NEAR stands for Neuroscience, Epigenetics, Adverse Childhood Experiences, and Resilience. And it provides a holistic understanding of how trauma and resilience impact people and our society as a whole. An oversimplified model of our brains has three main brain states. Our cortex is where complex thinking and long-term strategy occurs. This is the part of our brain we want to access when we are doing a difficult problem at school. However, when we are under stress, it is natural to fall into deeper brain states. Our limbic system is where emotions live and where we find connection with others. The deepest part of our brain is our brain stem, which regulates things we don't even have to think about, like our heart rate and body temperature. If something is really scary, we can go into a fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or faint response, which is a state of pure survival. When someone is experiencing trauma, they may not be able to access the thinking part of their brain because they are in a different brain state. So a skill that we like to teach is called the 3 R's. Reason, relate, regulate. As we use this knowledge about brain states to help create more trauma-informed environments, if we see someone who is activated, First, we want to support their regulation. Just working through deep breaths, getting a cold glass of water, or taking a walk can play a big role in the healing process. When there is regulation, then we want to relate, getting to that limbic system and just being there to build connection so that others do not feel so alone, which is just as critical as we know that healing happens in the context of healthy relationships. When we have ensured that the relationship is there, we can go to the reasoning and work to learn from or make sense of whatever experiences have led to that dysregulation in the first place. The neuroscience of trauma is an expansive field for further study, which helps us understand the universality of trauma and skills to help promote healing and resilience, just like the 3 Rs. This brings us to epigenetics, the E. The emerging field of epigenetics helps us understand the ways in which stress actually shapes our genes, our experiences, actually shaping our biology, and how this then gets shared with future generations. This may sound like just a bad thing, but it also tells us that we can create healthy ripple effects in the future as we create healthier environments. This is not as actionable, so we won't go as deep into the information here, but we'll continue to discuss this and more of the impacts further in a bit when we get to our content on historical trauma. Next, the A in neuroscience is for adverse childhood experiences, also known as ACEs. This study proves that the experience we have in our childhoods can have impacts throughout our lives. The original ACEs study was published in the late 1990s, and it looked at different individuals' experiences with 10 common forms of childhood adversity, ranging from different forms of abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction. The findings were that there were a greater correlation at a population level regarding how many ACEs were experienced in a range of negative mental, physical, and social health outcomes across the lifespan. It also found that ACEs are very common across our population, with about 2/3 of participants having at least one ACE and 1 in 8 experiencing 4 or more. A very, very important note here is that an ACE score is not predictive at an individual level, and just because one has a high ACE score, it does not mean they will experience poor outcomes, while someone with a low ACE score might. It is helpful at the population level in measurement to show the health and well-being of our society from a public health perspective, but it was not made as an individual diagnostic tool. This shows the importance of trauma-informed approaches, as we know ways to prevent harm and promote healing when harm does occur. Obviously, these 10 categories of childhood adversity are not the only forms of childhood adversity one can experience, and also not all ACEs may be experienced by all as being traumatic. Conversely, childhood experiences can be protective factors that occur during childhood and play an important role in contributing to resilience. Positive childhood experiences include the presence of a stable, caring adult, such as a family member, teacher, or mentor, a sense of belonging or connection, and enjoyment in community traditions. This again shines a light on the importance of creating trauma-informed environments as we work to create better outcomes. So now, let's look at PCEs. This looks at the positive and adverse childhood experiences. The PACES framework expands on the traditional ACEs model by recognizing both the adverse and positive factors that influence a child's development and resilience. Why PACEs matter in trauma-informed work? Because it recognizes that ACEs helps identify risks and the impact of trauma. And so by promoting PCEs, this helps strengthen resilience and long-term healing. Trauma-informed care should balance prevention, intervention, and healing, ensuring that all individuals have access to supportive relationships and safe environment. PACEs is a useful framework to help shift the focus from just trauma to also fostering positive growth and healing, helping to promote thriving through adversity. This brings us to the R in neuroscience, which is for resilience. People can and do heal from all kinds of trauma, especially when in relationships with others, and we can build skills that help us to withstand the stressors that we face during our lives. Individual resilience refers to a person's ability to recover from and adapt to adverse and potentially traumatic experiences. The most common resilience factor is the existence of a caring and supportive relationship. Other resilience factors include the capacity to make and follow through with plans, a positive self-view, and confidence in one's strengths and abilities. It also includes the ability to communicate, problem solve, and the capacity to manage feelings and those impulses that we might have. This brings us into the different types of trauma. We'll briefly hit on 3 different types of trauma: complex, collective, and cultural. Let's first begin by reading how we are impacted by complex trauma. Experiencing complex trauma, such as prolonged, repeated, or multiple forms of trauma, can impact healthy development. And without proper support, complex trauma can lead to changes in the brain that impact the body and the mind throughout the lifespan and influence behavior and relationships. Next, we'll look at collective trauma. Collective trauma is used to describe the impacts that trauma has on groups. Generally, this type of trauma is not a single event, but happens slowly over time within the group, breaking the social cohesion that we rely on, which tends to further perpetuate the problem. A psychologist, Erickson, whose definition of collective trauma you see on the screen, says in this quote, "A blow to the basic tissues of social life that damages the bonds attacking people together and impairs the prevailing sense of community. The collective trauma works its way slowly and even insidiously into the awareness of those who suffer from it, so it does not have the quality of suddenness normally associated with trauma." Another way to interpret this is by saying that I continue to exist, though damaged and maybe even permanently changed. You continue to exist, though distant and hard to relate to, but we no longer exist as a connected pair or as linked cells in a larger communal body. Let's look at cultural trauma. Similarly, but with a crucial difference, cultural trauma occurs when members of a collective feel they have been subjected to a horrendous event that leaves marks on that group's conscious, marking their memories forever and changing their future identity in fundamental and sometimes irrevocable ways. Cultural trauma happens when a big group of individuals go through something really painful or unfair that affects them for a long time. This could be because of war, racism, colonization, forced displacement, or other injustices. It doesn't just hurt one person. Similar to collective trauma, it affects entire groups of individuals. Imagine if your family had to leave your home and never come back because of something unfair. That would make you, your parents, and even your grandparents feel sad and hurt. Cultural trauma happens when a big group of individuals go through something really unfair together, and those feelings can last for a long time. How does that affect individuals? Well, families may tell stories about what happened, and those stories can make individuals feel sad or even worried. People might feel left out, treated unfairly, or they may not feel safe in certain places. Even youth who weren't alive when something happened and they learn of these things can later feel the effects because it changes the way families and communities grow. Here's an example. Think about a group of individuals who were forced to leave their land, who couldn't speak their language, or were treated unfairly for generations. Even if it happened long ago, the effects are still felt today through family struggles, lost traditions, and community challenges. So how does that show up today? Some families might feel like they've lost part of their identity because their culture was taken away or changed. Communities may face challenges like fewer jobs, lack of resources, or discrimination. And even if young people didn't personally go through the event, they may still feel its impact through family stories, through that cultural loss or struggles that were passed down. So how do we heal from cultural trauma? Well, we can learn about and celebrate cultural traditions, and that can help individuals reconnect with their identity. Speaking up against that unfair treatment helps communities heal. And finding that support, whether that's through family, community, or therapy, that also helps individuals process and move forward. Cultural trauma is tough, but communities are strong. Many individuals work to rebuild, to reclaim, and heal from the past, making things better for those future generations. This leads us to historical trauma. This is a term that describes the long term impacts of collective and cultural traumas have across generations. Like we discussed with epigenetics, we are learning that there is a biological component to historical trauma. We also know that there is a social component, as trauma can also impact the ways in which groups of people relate to one another and communities and how systems operate. As Maria Yellowstone Horse Braveheart says, historical trauma describes the cumulative wounding over the lifespan and across generations. Historical trauma occurs when groups faces widespread harm over time. Some examples of that are indigenous communities who've experienced colonization, forced removal from their lands, cultural erasure, African American communities suffering from slavery, segregation, and systemic racism, Jewish communities who face persecution, including the Holocaust, and even immigration and refugee families who were forced to flee their homes. This trauma is not just about the past. Its effects continue today in the form of poverty, discrimination, health disparities, and struggles with identity and belonging. So here's the final thought. Historical trauma shows how the past still affects the present, but it also proves that resilience, culture, and community can lead to healing. So by learning, speaking up, and supporting one another, young people can help break those cycles of trauma and help to create a better future. So how does trauma become the cultural narrative? Trauma changes that collective identity. The lessons we have learned from trauma have become more common, with old routines starting to be replaced and a new collective identity beginning to form. Depending on how that identity forms, it can promote healing moving forward or create more problems in the future. The role that culture plays in helping to shape the narrative that becomes the new normal for advocates. All of us have a role to play in helping to shape the culture that we want to live in. And it is important to understand and acknowledge trauma that has occurred. We don't want to erase individuals, families, communities, and entire cultural experiences, whether traumatic or not. We can work to create a society that works better. There are many examples of how collective, cultural, and historical trauma permeate our society today, and that creates many opportunities of how we can improve the world around us. As you see here on this slide, a set of questions that are often woven into a narrative that creates from groups of individuals to latch onto. Sometimes, as we see it today, smaller groups of individuals latch onto different and contradictory stories, which can lead to further diversiveness and trauma. However, we also know that narratives have the power to heal, and advocates play an important role in that process. So how does trauma impact individuals differently and roles we can play to promote that collective healing? Traumatic events that individuals may face at school and in their families and communities come in many forms and range from one-time incidents to experiences that are chronic or even generational. Like we talked about before, remembering that whether an event or circumstance is traumatic depends on the person's experience of that event. We cannot say that a particular situation is always traumatic for everyone. Whether an experience is traumatic is influenced by many factors, including our internal coping resources, our external supports, and broader community, culture, and societal factors that shape how we understand and respond to our experiences. Immediate reactions to traumatic events include feelings of fear, helplessness, and loss of control. Traumatic experience may have short and long-term effects on health and an individual's well-being and can alter how people view themselves, how they view others, and the world around them, by challenging their beliefs that the world is a safe place and that other people can be trusted and that they are worthy of care and protection. We're able to provide support in a number of ways at an individual level. We can support healthy relationships that help promote healing. At a community level, we can engage in activities that build trust and that help make places better. And at a systems level, never underestimate how these systems fit and influence each other. We'll discuss that a little bit more into our next session. As we will talk about throughout this series, we can advocate for policy, for practical changes that really help to create those conditions that help individuals move forward and thrive. Let's slightly switch gears to trauma-informed approaches and discuss what that looks like on a broader scale. Trauma-informed environments create conditions, environments, and supports that acknowledge and work to address the role that trauma plays at the individual, family, community, and system level. We want to create trauma-informed approaches for everyone because we don't know which individuals we interact with have experienced trauma, nor do we know what their traumatic experiences are. So it's important to try to support everyone. Environments, people, and systems become trauma-informed by thoroughly incorporating and understanding what the impact of trauma and resources and having support that promotes that healing and recovery. We are in the midst of a movement that is moving trauma-informed care into the way we navigate life more generally as well. It's beneficial to know that individuals who have experienced trauma can heal, especially within positive and protective relationships. Trauma-informed approaches are important because they, one, make recovery and healing possible. Two, they create protective factors that facilitate healing and resilience. And three, they generate senses of agency and empowerment for those who have experienced trauma. We have to be aware that sometimes services designed to help those that they serve can be and often have been inadvertently re-traumatizing. This is why trauma-informed approaches are necessary. Trauma-informed approaches follow what we are often referred to as the 4 R's. We realize and understand the impact of trauma on people and groups of people, like we've been discussing. We recognize the signs of trauma, which can be very different for other individuals, depending on the context. We respond effectively, like the 3 R's that we mentioned earlier. And we resist re-traumatizing those who we come into contact with. These services seek safety first and commit themselves to do no harm. I know this module has a lot of information, so let's take a moment to sit back and do some reflection. Using the 4 R's, let's take about 5 to 7 minutes to come up with some examples of what the 4 R's mean to you. First, we will go through them. Realize, knowing what trauma is. Some individuals go through really hard times and things that make them feel scared or sad for a long time. Trauma is when something bad happens and it affects how a person feels or acts. Trauma is more than just about a bad experience. It can change how a person sees the world and reacts to stress. A trauma-informed person understands that many individuals have been affected by difficult experiences and need kindness and support. 2, we recognize and we see the signs of trauma. Sometimes individuals who have been through tough times might feel angry, sad, or scared, even when nothing bad is happening right then at the moment. Trauma can show up in different ways, like feeling anxious, having trouble trusting others, or getting upset easily. If someone is acting differently, that might be dealing with something that we don't see. 3rd, respond. How can we help in a supportive way? If a friend is feeling sad or scared, you can be kind. You can listen to them and remind them that they're not alone. Being trauma-informed means listening without judging and creating those safe spaces and helping individuals feel supported instead of pressure. Which brings us to the 4th thing, resisting that re-traumatization and avoiding more harm. We should be careful with our words and actions so we don't remind someone of a bad memory in a way that makes them feel unsafe. Some rules, punishments, or even jokes can bring back bad memories for an individual who's faced trauma. A trauma-informed approach means making sure that our words and actions don't make things worse. These 4 R's help to create a safe and more understanding world where individuals can heal and where they can grow. The understanding of the 4 R's of trauma-informed care are further operationalized by incorporating 6 key principles into our ways of thinking, being, doing, knowing, and relating that promote trauma-informed environments. The 6 principles of a trauma-informed approach are safety, where we ensure emotional, physical, psychological safety for everyone. 2, collaboration, where we partner with others to help share meaningful power in decision-making and promote healthy relationships. 3, empowerment, voice, and choice. You have a voice as an advocate. Everyone who wants to should feel supported in sharing goal setting and determining what that plan of action should be. 4, trustworthiness and transparency. We are open and honest about decisions that are made. We do our best to ensure that we tell the truth so that individuals can trust us. 5, that peer support. Peer support and mutual self-help are key vehicles as we have discussed how important relationships are in the healing process. Utilizing those stories and lived experiences create a sense of belonging and connectedness. And 6, cultural, historical, and gender issues. Some individuals bear an extra burden of trauma based on belonging to a specific group. Think back to what we said about historical and cultural trauma. We want to think about how we operationalize these 6 principles from SAMHSA's framework when we are doing trauma-informed work. It is not just about calling ourselves trauma-informed, but it is a commitment to an ongoing process of learning and growth based on these principles and others that are important to the community or group that we're part of. In overviewing these 6 principles, we can ask ourselves these questions to help guide our practice in trauma-informed approaches. How do we promote safety, including physical safety, as well as psychological, social, and moral safety? Are we being transparent and earning others' trust, or do we simply demand it due to power imbalances? Are we creating conditions of empowerment for voice and choice so that individuals are genuinely able to engage and contribute in meaningful ways? Is it true collaboration? And do individuals feel valued? In what ways are we perpetuating oppressive cultures and marginalizing any person or group of people, whether intentionally or unintentionally? And are we building a culture in which we are providing individuals with skills to help support themselves? And are we building communities so that peers feel as though they are equipped and able to support others as well? We will never be perfect in doing this, but I believe that being trauma-informed is in the pursuit of living into these qualities more than about boasting that we have achieved them. Being trauma-informed requires a commitment to an ongoing process of learning and growth, guided by these 6 principles and other shared values of the community, of the culture. So as we're beginning to wrap up session 1, the importance of trauma and trauma-informed care are supported by various forms of science and provide a powerful lens to be better understood within ourselves, within others, and the world around us. It provides a holistic understanding of how trauma and resilience impact individuals and our society as a whole. It is a powerful framework to build a coalition and advocate, as it supports growing understanding of context that helps shape those communities and those systems and promotes self-understanding and compassion. Like we said at the beginning of this session, trauma-informed care changes the question from what's wrong with to what happened to you. Let's summarize what we've learned so far. Experiences become traumatic when they overwhelm our ability to cope. The same experiences may be traumatic for some and not others. It is our interpretation of the event that determines whether it becomes traumatic. Traumatic experiences come in many forms, ranging from one-time events to experiences that are chronic or even intergenerational. Some groups are at a greater risk of being exposed to traumatic events or circumstances. Based on those broad definitions you've heard and all of the information in this module, some things to consider. Have you ever faced traumatic challenges before, even if it was on a small scale? Did you notice anything that struck you as something you might like to participate in yourself by bringing awareness to trauma? There will be more opportunities to engage with this information as we prepare to discuss coalition building in the next module. We invite you to take a moment to reflect back to what we wanted to accomplish coming into today's session. And as we embark on this series, we keep these best hopes in mind as an anchor as we continue to engage with you. Based on what you already are doing and what you hope to get out of this experience, it is likely that some of our modules will apply to you and some may not. Your feedback on what parts of the series you like and don't like are critical for us to continue to improve this series as we move forward. It is our greatest hope that throughout and after these 8 sessions in this series, that this will help to form a coalition that really mobilizes around an issue or set of issues that are important to you, and mobilizing and being able to spread trauma-informed advocacy. It is also our hope that young people will become more involved in advocacy and that they will be supported with trauma-informed environments as they mobilize to improve systems. We want to ensure that people are supported so they do not get burnt out, especially for young people who we hope will remain civically engaged throughout their entire lives. And while we have some ideas for being able to provide further support and information down the line, and as mentioned before, we want your feedback and we invite you to let us know what would be useful to you. Within this trauma-informed advocacy process, we want to provide you with a survey link. We want to continue learning and growing together, making sure we cater to things, your needs throughout this series. As we build and grow, this survey will allow us to understand who you are and what you need at this current time in your life, and how you see the future of youth advocacy taking shape. We want to make sure you understand what trauma is and that you're able to improve and build on your advocacy skills. So we encourage you to fill out the information that best describes how you see the work that we are doing. And to conclude, the first session of this series, I want to thank you all for your time and attention and for helping to inform us of our efforts in advancing this movement. We firmly believe that with a united network of incredible advocates and coalitions doing this important work together, we can all spur action toward meaningful, sustainable, trauma-informed change. Please fill out the survey, and we look forward to seeing you in Module 2.